do you expect the Canadians to do? They've only got 3 mounted divisions, and that's only 10 men each.
Hold on, there's a message. This meeting is being live streamed. Got it. There we go.
We are live streamed now. We're hardcore. This is hardcore stuff now. We're live streamed. I just got to set a couple of things up in the background. See, we're live on YouTube. What we're gonna do, we're gonna get the YouTube feed going at the same time as we're doing this.
What does that mean?
Right? In other words, anyone that's really abusive, I'm obliged to read out their comments. I gotta name and shame them apparently. So what I do, I chuck a couple of links out to there's already somebody watching. Oh, there was. Now there's one. Do you know what? Amazingly enough, I've got 2,000 subscribers, right? And I can only manage one person online.
What institute are they all registered with?
Well, they're all different versions of Karl-James Langford. That's one thing that you can't do. You can't have a YouTube account and sort of have loads of fake identities. And to be honest with you, years ago, I even tried that, and it was like, right, no, we know it's you. Yeah, but it's a different me. Yeah, but we know it's you. Yeah, but it's James Karl Langford. Yeah, but it's still the same person. But how do you know you're using the same computer? Oh, right, okay. Yeah, that's how they knew. So you could technically probably, if you've got a laptop and a bloody, you could have like several laptops, but that's only like 3 identities. So so that's 3 identities. I don't know who the 1,997 are. I think you're one of them. Or maybe you might be too, but we're still struggling at trying to work out who these people are. So, oh yeah, we got 3 people watching now, which is great. Ooh. Oh, we've got One Love Karl, I'm in Llanelli. So he's back again.
Is it raining there?
What, in Llanelli? Oh no, well, you've got to ask if it's sunny in Llanelli. That's the thing, right? I just share it out a bit. Oh, so we got amazingly 3 people online, so we're gonna have to crack on. We're gonna have to give them some information, right? So here we go. And right, okay. So what we're going to do the Scilly Islands, right? And where we are going to go next, we're going to go. See, I've got to seem really professional now because we've got other people watching, right?
Right. Enough of this messing around. Crack on.
Yeah. Let's just give all my bank details, which I'm showing online now. So, oh, do you know what? We got the Channel Islands. We don't want to. Right. Okay. Scilly Islands. Bingo. So a map is coming up now. There it is, and the Isles of Scilly and the Scilly Islands. We looked at this on Tuesday.
Right.
And
one of the things, no map.
What's that?
No map.
Oh, you haven't got a map. Oh God! Bloody hell! This is. I'm stressing now. I don't really sort of. Oh God! Right, share. Yeah, I'm glad you're there because Goff would have probably gone through the whole lecture, right?
So what have you done?
And not even told us. Not he wouldn't. Are you able to see me on the screen as well?
No. All I can see is a field with a bit of heather in it.
But you can't see me.
No, I can see the map.
Oh right, but you can't see me.
No, I can see obviously your background logo. Only that's all.
Why can't you see me? All right, if we stop the share, right? Now there's 5 people online. We got to be good. All right, okay. So if we do that,
you've got to do this professionally.
like I'm trying to do this professionally. It's not as if I've been doing this for like for 10 years. I've got 7 people online now. That's brilliant. Oh God, and you can't see me on screen either.
No. So that ruins your acting career to start with.
Well, oh, I've done it. I'm online. Yes. You know what? There was 7 people on there. Now there's only 3. So now, see did you see that then? When there was like when nobody could see me, there were 7 people, right? And now I'm on screen. By the way, it's back up to 5 people. Right, I gotta say, don't forget to like and subscribe on there. We're doing the Scilly Islands in the Mesolithic period, folks. So that's what we're gonna do. You can imagine Bill. He'd be saying, "Oh God, no, no." So right, what do we know about
tools?
Who? Oh God, his bloody iron tools and the pyramids. Anyway, there was I got to mention I've done a couple of videos this week, and there was a chap a historian who died on Monday, and it's like he's got a massive following. So hopefully, if any of his people are looking at my stuff today, Ross Broadstock's work goes on. So what do you know about the Scilly Islands, Henri, my French friend from Germany?
They're surrounded by water.
Yeah.
There's a few people hiding on there.
And they only live on 5 islands, I'm told. There's only 5 islands now associated with Scilly that people actually live on. I'm sure there's a couple of private islands. There gotta be.
It is a bit of a hideaway. It is a bit of a terror for sinking ships. So there have been quite a lot of losses around the area.
Yes, true.
Yeah,
true.
The number of underwater rocks accessible. I think it's by ferry and a dodgy helicopter.
Yeah, and apparently there's an airfield on St. Mary's, and the highest point on the whole of the islands is only about 50 meters high. So what I want us to do is I've got some nice gen on the Scilly Islands, and we just try and sort of eke out where we are on the Scilly Islands. So what we're going to do, we're going to go back to that map there, and we're just going to go back, right? To try and find anything on the Scilly Islands, you need to just it's not very difficult. So if you type in the word Mesolithic there, and it does seem to come up, it comes up with a nice set of maps. What it should do. So if we go onto the images there. And one of the things that we've got this series of maps on the left here, which we'll have a look at. And one of the things is showing lots of other monuments, which is obviously not what we're doing today. But what it would be good is just to point out the excavations on the left there, and also what we're talking about is lots of cairns associated with the Scilly Islands. It's massively full of prehistoric archaeology. That's one of the things. But those are the microliths here that are very Scilly Island-ish. But the microliths that we are finding are not linked to microliths that are found on the mainland in Cornwall, for example. So they're really, really different. So one thing I'd like to do is I'd actually like to show you these maps. Now, what it is up in the right-hand corner, I only spotted this a little bit later on when I was doing the lecture on, it was a Tuesday, and there's dates on these. And when you go through the text, that little date on the right there that says 12,000 years BC, which would be 14,000 years ago, when you look at that, you've just got to probably take a little bit of that with a pinch of salt. Probably make that 12,000 BC, maybe 10,000 BC. What I've said in these lectures before is don't really worry about the dates, just worry about the effect of what's going on. So roughly, if we can think possibly that somewhere around the melting of the ice around 12,000 years ago. That's what we're looking at. Now, some of the historians, some of the writers about the Mesolithic period are talking about this being accessible 12,000 years ago. If that's the case, that map can't be the map that we need to be looking at. This is the map that we need to be looking at. And those little grey areas are that's like the marshy areas. And the one thing I've been saying in my other Mesolithic lectures, particularly on Tuesday and the previous week, which you missed, was when you go to places like Merseyside, and you look at the Lancastrian coastline, Morecambe Bay, and you go all the way up to Cumbria, you've got these mud flats. And that sort of grey areas there, the sort of where you've got in the water there, that would sort of be fordable, would be wadable at low tide in particular.
You've got to find land bridge by the looks of it to the first.
Yeah, you've got a defined land bridge. And the one thing, if you go over on the right here, you've got this grey area, this light grey, that's the land today. So over here, where you've got the Scilly Islands, and you've got that black dot there, that's really interesting, because much of there where you've got the Scilly Islands is now gone. Most of what we would understand about the Scilly Islands is very much different today. So if you think about that landmass being the Scilly Island, right, then it starts to change. So sometime now, this is the dramatic thing, change with image, right? Sometime there's again conjectured debate. Some people argue that you were still able to ford over to the Scilly Islands in the region of 8,500 years ago. This is what some people say. This is what some writers say. That's probably more likely, but there's a bit of a gap, isn't there? So what we're trying to get at is that the Scilly Islands was actually part of the dry land at one stage, probably at least 13,000 years ago. And between that period and 8,000 years ago, it became a clear island, right? And what you are seeing there is other little bits of green things that seemingly look like they're islands. But by the time we probably get to about 6,000 years ago, right, things have massively changed in regards to the Scilly Islands. And if we want to think, that's probably the one there on the left. That's what the Scilly Islands would have looked like 6,000 years ago, at least 6,000 years ago. But then again, let's just not get too confused. Let's take some of these images with a pinch of salt. And by the way, there was 7 people watching. Now there's 4. So I must be saying some things wrong. I think you must be doing some weird actions in the background there, Henri. But the point of this is as I go on to my notes, the point of this very much is that when we think about the Scilly Islands archaeology, even in the Neolithic period, lots of this island was still this size, right? It was still this size. And then what's happened is that bit by bit, it's divided into 200 little islands. And some are bigger than others. So what I did do when I was actually doing these notes, I sort of I looked at the following information that we're going to do now at the end, and I thought, should I have done it at the end? And maybe I should have, but what we're going to do this at the beginning, really. And what it is, it's actually a statement produced by the Scilly government. It's actually on the Scilly government website. It's actually produced by English Heritage, but it's brilliant because it's like really, it's really condensed. And it's sort of, you know, it's really useful. So if you've got a Scilly, if you type in Mesolithic, Scilly Mesolithic, you come across the scilly.gov.uk website, and there's a PDF there which you can't seem to download on some devices, but I've managed to download it on one of my devices, which is good. And basically what it says, it talks about the prehistory. It gives you some key facts. So we're going to do these key facts now. So it says introduction to the islands. Now, the other reason why I want to do the Scilly Islands is because, and we think about the Scilly Islands in other periods like the Neolithic period and so on. The reason why I wanted to do the Scilly Islands in different periods is because, you know, island archaeology is as fascinating as mainland archaeology, because when we look at the Neolithic in Orkney, you'll understand that it's amazing. When you look at the Neolithic on Jersey, it's amazing. The Neolithic in Ireland, it's amazing. So the Neolithic on the Scilly Islands, amazing as well. So this is our introduction to the Scilly Islands. We have done the Scilly Islands before, but it was not on our mainstream lectures. It was on one of those evenings that I used to do. I would do comparisons with the archaeology on different islands and stuff, and this was one of them. So, introductions to the islands. There are 200 little islands today, and basically most of the islands could be described as granite rock sticking out. And if we want to sort of go to another screen, we'll just keep this here a minute. Hang on, if we could just try and keep this. If we could go to another screen a minute. Oh no, we don't want to do that yet, do we? We want to type in there, and we want to go there, and we want to type in the Scilly Islands again. So we're going to type in the Scilly Islands, and I used to get all this set up ready, but I think sort of wandering around.
We're winging it today.
What's that?
We're winging it.
Well, you're winging it. I'm just making it up as I go along. Right. Okay. There. That's the one I wanted. We're wanging it. Right. So basically, as we do the description. So 5 of those major islands are inhabited. You've got St. Mary's there, which is the biggest one. And the word off island. This is a key word. Off island. St. Mary's is the mainland, right? So okay. The islands are classed as St. Agnes, which is one of the 4 big islands, Briar, which is the other big island, St. Martin's is the other big island, and Tresco. Right, I'm not discounting people ain't living on some of the other islands, but the main 5. Right, okay. Let me get the jargon. If you don't live on Scilly, right, you've got 5 islands, right? If you live on Scilly, St. Mary's is the mainland, and the other 4 places that people live, right, are as described. Now, when you go to Orkney, it's the same thing. You know, the way to insult somebody from Orkney is to say, I live on the mainland. They say, oh, I've never seen you on the mainland before. And they go into a big diatribe. Which school did you go to? Oh, I went to Aberdeen School. And then they look at you and they storm off. Because to be honest with you, it's when the jargon
is concept of the mainland.
Yeah, their mainland is the big island, which has got this capital city, Orkney, and the cathedral. In Kirkwall on Orkney, the main big island, right? That's the mainland. It's not Scotland. That is the mainland. So, but what my notes tell me is that, you know, you've got sort of St. Helens, you've got Teen, and you've got Samson, and you've got the Eastern Islands and Gur, and the thing is, you've got 200 different islands altogether. Some of these other little ones are going to be lived on, but it's a subtidal, intertidal environmental range, and you know, the sea level. It has long been known that the islands in their current form are a result of past sea level rises. And when you think about it, that obviously 8,000 years ago, the landscape between all these little islands would have been farmed. There would be people living. There would be standing stones and so on. So again, I'm going to compare with Orkney again. If you go to Orkney, they talk about earlier archaeology before the Neolithic period, and then they point out to the water and they say it's out there, because what they have been doing is the lower waters. When you go to the Ness of Brodgar on Orkney, right, there's a big pool of water either side, and that it would be the agricultural land, which has now since flooded. The 2 lochs either side. So the geology itself, again, back to this, as compared to Orkney, Orkney's got lots of sedimentary rock here. This is that granite igneous body. And it's basically, what you do have is this description of stone wreaths. And Scilly is the same sort of topographical sort of definition as you would see with Dartmoor, Bodmin, St Austell, that type of landscape. So it links very much in with that side of things. So just a few other little facts, and we'll do a little bit more archaeology, and we'll go back to my notes and what I did do on Tuesday. I basically said we'll pick out one of the islands. I'll give you a little bit more of the topography, and then you can sort of have a little look at the rest, really. So interesting place names as well. Just quickly, briar, the wood briar there is obviously a Cornish wood, and the rest are basically English. But anyway, most of the islands, the highest point of the islands, I said was 50 meters. Who cares? Is 48 meters, the highest point. So the highest point there is on the island of St Mary's. So when you think about it, the water level's risen from 12,000 years ago up until sort of 6,000, 5,000. It keeps rising a little bit. So most of the risen waters occurred over that 4,000 year period between 12 and 8. So just to give you an idea of scale, St Mary's Island, 629 hectares, times by 2.5. That's not even the size of Cardiff.
It's not
so
big.
These places are not big, are they? Briar at 126 hectares, Tresco at 297, St Martin's 222, and St Agnes 148. So these are not massive areas. They're not huge, massive places. But you could sort of argue that they're big enough to still to support people. So as I sort of go up on my notes, and if I look at my little plan, there's an A road on St Mary's.
That's more than there is around here.
No, there's not. The reason why it's not an A road around you, right, is because nobody knows the alphabet. Well, didn't they? Wasn't it a D road? And somebody said, yeah, it's more like a D road.
I think cattle
anyway.
Anyway.
Yeah. Shut up. So is the road on your housing estate a quagmire? Yeah. Anyway, basically, there's an airport as well near the old town. There's an A road. There's several castles, all the rest of it. When you go up to the likes of Tresco, there's castles and stuff. On St Martin's, there's like a D class road, I think. Anyway, so and actually, I'm to be corrected. There is actually a higher point on marked on this as being 51 meters above sea level, but who cares?
It's not that's going to make a lot of difference when the water comes.
It's not bloody Mount Everest, mate. Anyway, so anyway, Brian Evans, we've got to mention Brian Evans because he's on with us online. He says he can see the map better now. I'm glad you can see it because I can't see anything. Right, okay.
Yeah,
so,
we've still got a map. You're all good.
I'm still all good, am I? Right, so basically, just give you a little bit of information about St Mary's before we get onto the nitty-gritty. 7 people on. Oh my God, 7 people on here now. Whoa, big time. We're nearly in double figures. Oh, we've lost 2. Right, St Mary's is the largest of the islands, measuring 4 kilometers long by 2.8 kilometers long. But when you think about that, this would have been a hillock when all these islands were linked together in the Mesolithic period. And if you looked over from St Mary's over, I'm told that you can actually see the Scilly Islands from Land's End on a really good day, right? So you would have definitely been able to see it in the Mesolithic period, definitely. But then again, there would have been other humps and undulations in the way, but that might not be the case when you think about it. So good thing that. So obviously dramatic sort of headlands, dramatic sort of rocky coastline, but again, this would have commanded a flat landscape of moors and salt marshes and all the rest of it in the past. It's entirely granite, right? It's an entire granite rock. And then we've got all the other islands, which I don't want us to sort of look about and think about. But there's one massive important fact about the Scilly Islands, which we're going to. So if we come back to those maps that we had earlier on. So if we think about this sort of dramatic nature, this sort of dramatic sort of world, there is something else amazing to be said about the Scilly Islands, which is sort of lost. But before we talk about that, I need to talk about something else. We're talking about island archaeology today, and we will just go up until 12. Is that okay?
Yeah, if we go to 12, that's grand.
Good. No, that's the grand you're going to give me. Thanks. I knew you'd say that. So when I said this before, I'm going to mention it in the context, and then we're going to go back to the Scillies. Shetland Islands, for example, when they were building the great sort of connections with the oil rigs, the piping, and when they were doing all the landscaping, and when they were really developing the Shetlands for the oil industry in the late 1960s, early the 1970s, there was no archaeologists. And when nobody had really studied and interpreted Shetland at all properly. And then what happened really was it was only in the 1980s that an archaeologist entered the island, only to find out that most of the archaeology from the Viking period, most of the archaeology from the Neolithic period was already flattened. And the reason why I'm mentioning that is it's a massive tragedy, because you're talking about in a time when we could have had archaeologists working there. You know, you're thinking about it. This is a time when television archaeologists are big time in the late 1960s. You got the likes of Sir Mortimer Wheeler, Magnus Magnusson, Glyn Daniels, but nobody's talking about Shetland. So lots of the Shetland archaeology goes. This is the reason why I'm mentioning this point, because antiquarians and archaeologists on the Scilly Islands, so when we look at the Scilly Islands over the next many months, looking at the Neolithic period, we will come back to it, because the Scilly Islands has been a place of study since 1752, looking at its prehistory. 1752. And the name William Borlasse rings a bell. Now, William Borlasse comes up in when we're looking at Brixham Cave, which is Torbay, Brixham Cave. Borlasse comes up. The name William Borlasse comes up. He's on the Scilly Islands in 1752, and he records various entrance graves, standing stones, ancient field walls, all these different types of things. I'm not going to guess, but I'm thinking that when Borlasse goes there, the coastline was a little bit further out again. I'm going to guess that one. So he may have recorded things that are no longer visible because they're underwater. He also mentioned that St. Mary's, which is the bigger island there in the green there on that bit, which is actually an island, Borlasse is there in 1756, 1769, and he excavates. He undertakes some excavations, and between that date and at 1929, there have been up to 12 excavations looking at these sites. So there's some great names of archaeologists working there. A Reverend John Troutbeck, he used to like his salmon. He was there in 1780, 1796. Troutbeck. Yeah, here's another one. Lord Augustus Smith, proprietor of the islands. He was excavating there between 1834 and 1872. So the ancient past, and these people were going out to the farther off islands like Samson to sort of record. They had engineers and all sorts of things. So the islands themselves has been massively extensively looked at, and the Ordnance Survey archaeological officer, who's very famous, and OGS Crawford, was there in 1926. So what we're doing, we're looking at an island we're looking at an island system that has been extensively studied. Brian Evans says online, salt marsh lamb. I've no idea what that means. All right, sheep grazing on salt marshes. Right, okay, silly sod. Right, okay. Getting distracted by YouTube. Right, so what we're going to do, I want us to look at some more information, some more facts. So what would help is our YouTubers want to see more images, don't they? So somebody said looking at images is image porn. But I'm not going to type that in.
I would not. No. Steve,
And the reason why, right? One, I would lose my license to broadcast, which has taken 13 years to get. Oh, and by the way, people, I don't advise it if children are watching. Don't type that in. Please. Brian Evans asked, was William Borlass the first one to write about the Scilly Islands? No, he's not the first one to write about the Scilly Islands, but he's the first one to put the prehistoric investigation into the Scilly Islands. So yes. So here we go. Just chuck a couple more images on there. What we want is those little buggers there. We want those, and we want to look at them, and they are important. They are our microliths. So again, let's chuck a bit of Sicilian porn out there in regards to archaeology. Or am I allowed to use that word? Yeah, of course I am, in the right context. So what we're talking about is that the massive thing so what we're going to, I'm all over the shop now, and we've got to go back to this one. The massive thing is that the Scilly Islands has been known as the Island of the Dead, and the name Island of the Dead must come from earlier times. So if we read out this sort of quote, right, this is actually from the website Ancient Penrith, right, which is quite a good one. Ancient Penrith, there's loads of stuff about prehistory of Cornwall on there, so go on it, right. So in the Bronze Age, Scilly comprised one big and one small island. So let's just think about that one. Most of it was connected, right? So what it is all this stuff here, St. Mary's, all of this in the Bronze Age was still linked together, and St. Agnes was separated, right? So there's two islands at that stage. In some respects, it was a more viable place to live than today because it was bigger and the climate was better, warmer and less wet, windy and stormy. Now, this is a good point, right? I want to make this point because this is to do with global warming. Oh yeah, this is another way of losing my channel, right? Some people suggest that, like the old Professor David Bellamy, that global warming is a natural phenomenon, right? And other people suggest that it was warmer in the past, and all that's happening will actually go into our climate that we had in the Mesolithic period, right? So the climate has dropped. I know there's people that are just arguing that it's global warming and we should do more, right? The point is that it was warmer back in the Bronze Age. We know that. I know that more than anything, because when we do the Bronze Age, there was this catastrophic disaster 1628 BC when Thera went up, and there was another volcano on Iceland went up, and the temperature in the Bronze Age dropped, and we've never been able to get back to that temperature again. So if people go on about ice sheets, the ice sheets came back big time after the Bronze Age. So what I'm trying to do is make archaeology relevant, because it is relevant. So the island of Scilly constitutes a separate world, a somewhat mystical world, traditionally reputed to be the Isle of the Dead. Keep reading. And certainly the sheer number of burials, orientated cairns and cairnfields on the islands of today suggest that. However, the Island of the Dead might not just be to do with the burial chambers and the burial monuments, which are to be found on the Scilly Islands. So if we sort of go with this and we go back a little bit, and then here a standing stone, maybe associated with a burial, or what we need to do is we need to look at, oh, there we go, the word off coast. Look at that. We're definitely on the island now.
Oh, you definitely
definitely are. It's islands. There we go. You can see when we go to the Neolithic period, this is going to be absolutely amazing. Oh, we're being reminded by Brian Evans. He's well on frame today. He's also guilty of looking at porn. So nobody wants to know that. Gulf Stream heat comes in to the island. That's true, but more so in the past, I would say. So the word "the island of the dead" could, however, be interpreted as an isle beyond time. So you've got a play on words there. It's distant. It's where our ancestors lived, or it's where our friends used to live, and we can't get there anymore. So there are months of the year that you can't get out to the Scilly Islands. That's it. And even more so in the past, when you think about it, to sort of demonstrate this, when water is narrowed between two isthmuses, the water gets channeled and is more potent. So today it's probably easier to get to the Scilly Islands, even though it's a wider span. Back then it would have been more treacherous when the water is gradually taking over the land between the two isthmuses of the headland of Cornwall, which is not the headland of Cornwall today because it's obviously keeps retreating, and bits of this bigger island that once existed as the big island on the Scillies. So the Isle of the Dead could, however, be interpreted as an isle beyond time or beyond normality. In ancient times, it was reckoned that the souls of the dead went westward towards the setting sun. So this is nothing really to do with burial, is it? It's to do with the concept. And then it becomes the concept. It becomes the actuality where people are actually being buried there. The tradition of a sunken landmass. So this, again, if we sort of, hang on. Ooh, why is it not let me get in there? Right, let's just get in there. Oh, we need that other doodah. Up, up, up. There we go. So when you think about it, if you go back there, all that sort of grey area, and actually look, lots of the green, it's difficult to squint your eye and think about, bloody hell, look at the amount of land that's become lost. And there's a point to be made here. I'm going to make this one thing first, and then we're going to make the point. So the tradition of a sunken landmass, lioness, perhaps the Scilly Islands, or a landmass between Scilly and the mainland, adds to this mystique. And that's the point. This is the point that I made last week. And again, a point by Brian online. Yay, sea levels are constantly changing. And the point is yeah, we say that about Doggerland. We say that about the land bridge between Orkney and mainland Scotland becoming lost. But nobody seems to really talk about the West Coast. I must be doing so badly. I had 8 people at one point, down to 3. So on the West Coast, on the West Coast, we don't really talk about the West Coast because the Scilly Islands is actually the West Coast. We don't talk enough about it. We haven't really studied it. Clement Reid was interested in the West Coast, but he wanted to make his point in 1913 in submerged forest on the East Coast, because this is where all the academics were. You could clearly wander down to the foreshore of the River Thames and see timber sticking out. So his audience was there. He didn't dismiss it. He was saying that there was other stuff on the West Coast, but he was concentrating on the East Coast. And what we've got to do, we've got to sort of understand that the West Coast, and going over to Ireland as we did, looking at Hermitage and the Shannon Valley and all that lost land was fascinating. And that was all where this was all linked with a land bridge between mainland Britain and Ireland. That's all part of the West Coast. So this is one of the things. And just this last point that we need to make about this sort of this more looking into the little nitty gritty and the overview and all the rest of it, is that Scilly is dense with ancient sites, and it's got so many different standing stones and cliff sanctuaries that wouldn't be cliff sanctuaries back in the day, but lots of sort of cairns and so on. So if we sort of go back again and we sort of finger where we need to be. And there, love it. Back to these. There's a mystery about these. We had a big mystery. And yes, we're also reminded about. Can I go off on a tangent? Yes, thank you very much. Thanks for the permission to do that. I'm being reminded of something that I did do on Tuesday. And the reason why the Tuesday lecture went on for 2.5 hours is because I kept being distracted for the right reasons, because we kept on the subject, but we kept sort of going off down little avenues. So one thing I'm being reminded of, again, by our friend Brian, right? Brian of Nazareth, it's a very naughty boy. Right, okay. So this is what we see off the when you go to Borth and Cardigan Bay on the West Wales coast. You see this, right? Now this is that sort of proof that we've got land spreading all the way over to Ireland, or at least part of it spreading over to Ireland. Now, when I was standing, so if we go back a moment, I actually still work in Newquay and Aberyron, right? And when I was, there we go. So we're going in there. Whoever Kenneth Williams Garden and Tree is.
That's
Bloody
you.
hell, they're having, hang on, they're having free advertising, yeah? Buggers. Right, here we go. I'm going to charge these people the animalarian. Right, so here we go. We get some places on you. Wait, oh, there's Borth Beach. So if we go Borth Beach, we were basically a bit further down, right? And we were where's that silly place where I work? Hey, come on, where's that silly place? Where's Aberyron on you? Hang on a minute. It's your fault. You get a grip. Get a grip. He's a very naughty boy. Right, okay, let's carry on. No, she's not. She's a messiah. Right, okay. No, he's the messiah. Oh, yeah. Anyway, carry on. Well, I was at Aberyron, right, and I basically said I was setting the scene, because at Aberyron, up until the beginning of the last century, there were still the remains of a First Nation or native Cymru, pre-Norman sort of castle, and it'd been eroded into the sea. And as I stood there, I thought, bingo, because we're doing the Mesolithic period, I sort of pointed north, and I basically said, up north, there you go. That's the precise locality of the lost world, known as the Welsh Atlantis. And at 6,000 years ago, it still existed. We don't talk about that. And it was a huge landmass that would have been familiar to the Neolithic people and all the rest of it, which was lost. And again, we're talking about that tragedy. And we're thinking that, it's something that was shared as an experience between people on the east and the west coast and the north coast and the south coast. And I just wanted to mention that because we do obsess on different bits of archaeology. And can I just tell you that I've got a big problem when we go to the Neolithic period, because there's so much in the Neolithic period. I've got to be very careful not to do everything. Because if I do every single chambered tomb in the British Isles, every single standing stone, every single Stonehenge, right, it's going to see you out, Henry. I know, Henry, I know the doctor said you got another 50 years, but I do not want to be still teaching you in 50 years' time, right? Don't take it personally, right? Yeah? But after 2 years, I think you'll be chambered out, and you'll be wanting to live in one. There you go. There are plenty of empty ones there. You and I can choose our pick. Hey, I should use that as a joke, shouldn't I, when we come to it? Anyway, so shut up.
Right, where do these come from then?
These are actually from the Scilly Islands.
Yeah, I know they are, but
we're going to come on to that now.
All good.
This is what we're doing. This is why you're being uneducated by me. The microliths from the Scilly Islands. Now, my little notes now. These themselves, we do find a small scattering these at different locations on the Scilly Islands, and they paint a different narrative. And that's the narrative that we're going to go. So just think of this lightly, and then I'm going to interject and I'm going to come back. There is little doubt that the small lithic assemblages from the Isles of Scilly are totally different to that from any other Mesolithic site in Britain. And I'm glad it didn't use the word mainland there. So, and there is a point to be made here when we look at Nab Head in West Wales, near St David's. They've got evidence of a quarry. In fact, they've got evidence of lithic manufacture. In fact, they got 40,000 fragments at Nab Head in just one small area. And bits at those, and obviously the end artifacts, the axes and the arrowheads have obviously been traded elsewhere. That's the rest of Britain. Now these are not the same type and style of anything else found in Britain from the Scilly Islands. They actually are very similar to the types of Mesolithic microliths that are to be found in northern France, Belgium, and the Netherlands, which is very, very odd. Very, very odd. So if we sort of go back, and if we type in the word microliths there, usually microliths look like these ones in the center of the screen. These are the types of ones from Flag Fen, right? Or the ones on that hand side. They're very distinctive. They got several faces, several different sides, several nap faces, right? Being excavated here. And then we actually, if we go to sort of look, there we go. Microliths and maritime mobility. This is what this this is what this is about, this little article. We'll read out what this says. Once Britain had become separated from Europe mainland it's saying, well, that's right, 800 years ago. Mesolithic stone tool traditions on opposite sides of the newly formed channel embarked upon different directions of development. Patterns of cross-channel contact have been difficult to decipher in this material of lithics. Prior to the expansion of farming, or farming already existed, but we'll move on from that bit. Hence the discovery of late Mesolithic microliths or apparent Belgian affinity at the western extremity of southern Britain in the Isles of Scilly comes as something of a surprise. The find is different here in detail, along with alternative scenarios that might explain it. So that's all good stuff, and it basically tells us about the condition that is being an islander, right? And the condition being an islander is that when you look at Orkney, it develops on a new trajectory, right? And what we've got is the a vole species that is only found in Orkney and mainland Europe, but nowhere else in Britain, right? So in regards to the Scilly Islands, they've got the Scilly vole as well, right? Which is unique to the rest. So what we're saying is that islands develop on their own trajectory. If they've got links with other worlds, then so be it. So be it, my lovelies. So what they've got is that's the napped edge there. You can see the nice napped edge there and a nice little bit of an edge there. But this is that edge there, and these are the main scraping edges. The ones on the left, you can see these little slight areas here that have been napped. And if you want to watch videos of napping, the guy to watch is Phil Harding, the guy from Good Old Time Team.
Yeah,
that's what you need to watch. So what we got is this is very much linked to examples from Europe, trapezoidal examples. That's the word, trapezoidal examples that we actually find in Europe that have several different edges. Oh, and Brian wanted you all to know that he lives in a quarry.
Good.
What's that, my friend?
Someone has to.
Well, yes, somebody has to. Somebody definitely has to. Right? They really, really do. But again, finding these sort of unique trapezoidal types of flints that are very much linked to sites in Europe is a surprise, but not unusual, because what we see islands looking towards different links, they got a different projection. And I think the best metaphor for that is that most people on Orkney and Shetland used to see themselves as Scandinavian before they ever saw themselves as Scottish. But mainland Scotland is obviously closer to mainland Orkney shortly, but they didn't see it that way. They were obviously looking towards Norway rather than Scotland, which is a very, very interesting point there, right? So what we've got the last bit really, and the last bit is where we're going to go now. So I'm going to look at this bit, and this sort of gives a little bit more of an overview. And obviously, these notes tell me the experience, the characteristics of these islands are very, very unique. And the idea of the Mesolithic period on the Scilly Islands, the origins for the Mesolithic period and where we see people and how things go with the flora and fauna and all the rest of it actually comes beyond 12,000 years ago, naturally. So here we go. Current knowledge of the Paleolithic environment background of the Scilly Islands, interestingly enough, might come from much deeper, even to 23,000 years ago. It sort of tells us that, you know, the flora and fauna, the sense of flora and fauna is very much something that would have been enterprisingly reached the Scilly Island 23,000 years ago when it was bloody cold. Now, if you move that aside, if you just move that aside, when we were looking at some deeper research, one of our guys is from Cornwall on a Tuesday evening. He was saying, "Oh, Karl, what about Tresco? There's microclimates on Tresco." That's proved my point, because something missing in this lecture today is that I was talking about microclimates, and I've been going off on one the past few weeks by saying, look, large numbers of people lived in Britain in the Ice Age, and if they lived in microclimates, they could have lived on headlands like this, where it was warm enough to live out in the open, not having to live in caves. In Ireland, for example, it might be that in Ireland, when you've got the mass flooding of the Shannon landscape at Hermitage, that people have been living there for thousands of years, even within the ice sheet landscape. I think this ice sheet landscape and the frozen landscape is overdone. The same thing when you get into the Mesolithic period, the landscape is fully wooded, right? I think there are little areas of the world in Britain, and I include Ireland. I include Ireland with that, and Scilly Islands and all the rest of it. I believe there's lots of things going on that don't preclude humans, that include humans. So what we've got is there is pollen analysis coming up in regards to small lakes and build up in so on. We're starting to see, listen to this. Pollen suggests open, largely grassland dominated vegetation during and maybe throughout the Paleolithic period. People must have undoubtedly lived there in the Paleolithic period, and it wasn't as bad as people think. Similar Arctic tundra conditions were also identified in deposits from the seaward area of St. Martin's, right? So what we're talking about is that there's a lot more going on, and this leads into our Mesolithic period. They have found Paleolithic artifacts, and they reckon that they found fine blades. A fine blade has actually been found on the Scilly Islands, which is of Paleolithic date. So we know that people were living there in amongst the flora and fauna. So that is in fact intriguing. And so the distribution of evidence may actually point to people living and animals being there a lot earlier than we thought. So as we start to come to the end now, and we think about sort of looking again at that earlier map and probably calling it a day. Is if we go back to that earlier map, by the way, Brian wants you to know personally, Henry, right, that his house is made from the stones that were quarried from the quarry that his house is now built in.
Excellent. It's called recycling materials.
I thought you'd be into that. Do you know what we should do? Brian will be on tonight at 7 o'clock. Henry won't be with us tonight at 7 o'clock, but he will be with us next week. So he passes on his love if he's got to dash instantly. Do you know, I love Brian. He's my accepted stalker. I love him to bits. And he's from Llanelli. Brian, I love you. It's probably a woman. It's got to be. Anyway, because there's all these women out there. There you go. He's still there. I got 7 people watching. So basically, looking at these islands, and it says it's talking about the sort of submerging of the landscape, and they're talking about maybe this is right. I need to get this point across. Some people are now arguing that the landscape between Great Britain and mainland Europe becomes submerged before 8,000 years ago. And if that's the case, we moved into being isolated and we ended our Mesolithic a lot earlier. Now, I'm not going to go with that now because I don't have enough evidence, right? They also say the same about the Scilly Islands. And if that's the case, people got to the Scilly Islands and become trapped. And they were able to evolve their own culture. And if they were able to evolve their own culture, they were seeing other places like northern France as much linked to them as mainland Britain, which would be a good analogy, right? But if we move that aside, there is one last point, and we're looking towards small mammalia, and we've got 8 people. And Carl says, I am a bloke, brother. Okay, I still love you, Brian, and so does Henry. So the unusual small mammal fauna goes some way to support not a later island formation, but an earlier island formation. So let's think about that. The Scilly Islands become disconnected earlier with the humans and all the flora and fauna, and therefore the evidence to that is, what's the evidence to that? We'll do it now. There's something known as a root vole. Now, root voles are very rare across Britain, but these root vole seem to have become isolated and disconnected and not hunted by the other animals that we see on mainland Britain. They become disconnected and they become an individual isolated population on the Sicilian Islands. Also, I mentioned an animal earlier on called the Scilly shrew. And the Scilly shrew itself is an animal that's not found anywhere else in Britain. It's found nowhere else in Britain. It's unique. It's diversified into the island. It's not linked to any other shrew. And some people argue that it's evidence to say that the Scilly Islands become islands a lot earlier. But on that note, to add some sort of conjectured confusion, right? If we look at this and we think about there's the Lioness Project, this sort of lost land between the islands. And by the way, everybody on who was watching on YouTube, not all of you have liked and subscribed yet. Make sure you do. Otherwise, I'm going to send Henry the Frenchman over to sort you out. And don't forget to join as well. If you joined, right, press the join button. Right, it's £1.99 a month. And you get special updates. And you might be able to join me for a live recording as a special person online. So one last thing I'd like to mention is that obviously the continuous isolation of the Scilly Islands is very similar to the continuous rise in water on the eastern coastal board. When we talk about Doggerland, what we sort of say between 12,000 and 8,000 years ago, before it could become completely isolated as islands, the water's rising a little bit every year. They say every century the water level rises about two meters, right? Talk about that point briefly before we leave. 2 meters, right? That makes sense. So if you think over 4,000 years, that's 80 meters, right? And then from 8,000 to 6,000, maybe another 20 meters, or wherever you want to look at it, it's a lot of water rising, right? And if that's the case here, which is probably the case, this was continually, the land was changing over this long period of time, and people were having to retreat. And that last point I'd like to make, right, and what we need to think of is the enigmatic image. And we're going to end with the enigmatic image today. And the enigmatic image is, so if you type in, if you go to here, and because this is basically more or less the last lecture that we're going to do, associated with the Mesolithic period. We'll be doing a little bit of Mesolithic next week, but we'll be moving into the Neolithic next week, between 8,000 and 4,500 years ago, right, or thereabout. What I'm gonna do? Where's that image? Oh no, it's all gone to pot at the end. It's your fault, Goff. Goff? No, he's not.
He's
even
not here.
God, it is his fault for not being with us. Goff frightened me, you know. Hang on a minute. We got bloody mammoths. We don't want mammoths. Where's that image? There's an image. If we type in Lost World, right, we've got to put this in here. They're all losing their plot online. We're losing people like dead sloths. Oh, by the way, Brian wants to say something. He said, Brian, that would be great. Thank you. So much lost in Llanelli. Well, I tell you what, he mentioned that. And as I'm prevaricating, I was in Aberystwyth, as I say, on the weekend, right? And up until, oh, there it is, enigmatic or what? I was in Aberystwyth, and he makes the point. Brian makes the point. Brian, it's only £1.99, by the way. You can join. I need the money. Look at this. I need to shave. I need to get some shavers, right? Because Henry won't send me any money anymore. He just, because I haven't been able to have shave in 10 years. He's been expecting me to do this free. Anyway, the point is, I was in Aberystwyth, and there was this beautiful building in Aberystwyth up until the beginning of the year, right? It was an old workhouse, right? And it was built, say, in about 1850. It was beautiful, sort of really tall gables. And it wasn't listed or scheduled, and they demolished it just a few months ago. And you're thinking, they're still demolishing beautiful buildings. Yes, so much lost in Llanelli, it's still going. We've got to look out for it. And also, that links us directly into this final point. So much lost. Think about it. Let's have this conversation. Who are we going to pick on? There's that individual there, that guy and the child. The child's looking at us. There they are, those two. He's saying that, he's saying, do you know over there, that little bit of green land, right? I used to play there when I was a child 40 years ago. And the child's thinking, how is that? And he's saying, within my lifetime, the water level within this landscape has risen 1 meter. And the child is saying, so that means if I get to 40 or 50 years old, everything that we're standing on now will be gone. And mother's saying on the right-hand side, yes, it will be gone. And that's going to be his granddad. Granddad saying, actually, that building that's standing there, we had a little fire in there. We used to live in there a year ago. Now it's gone. So this is that feeling. This is the sense. This is the end of our Mesolithic period. Mesolithic ends between 8,500, 8,000 years ago. Bradford University with Boulder Cliff, they believe it ended a lot earlier. I believe them. I go with that. We've already got agriculture in Britain. That means we've moved into the Neolithic period before we get isolated in Ireland. Similar problem story all across Britain. And that is the end of basically 6 months of Mesolithic. Little bit about Mesolithic next week, but we'll be moving into the Neolithic period. Right, as an enigmatic image, what do you feel about that image, Henry? Does it hit you in the gut? It does me.
Obviously, I mean, those images of the land changing over a period of time brings it home how much things have changed and will change in the future. I mean, obviously, you know, if you're saying 2 meters for every X thousands of years or hundreds of years, you know, the islands don't have a long time to last effectively if they've only got 50 meters to play with.
This is the thing. Well, 50 meters to play with, mate. Some Pacific islands have got a meter. So, you know, and some Caribbean islands haven't got much more. And you're thinking, well, you know, these will hang out a bit more. You know, they will be hanging out a bit more. But it's the Pacific islands you've got to worry about. But
I think
again,
the intriguing point is these microliths that I think you said trace to potentially France, and obviously the landmass link between France and the UK was much closer at this time as well. So does that mean that the potential trade routes or communication routes?
The thing that we learned from Nab Head in West Wales was that water movement, trade, that was all going on because what basically they had these little pebbles that had drill holes in them, and similar exactly the same ones be found at Star Car, exactly the same size. We said that it's probably from a beach nearby. It could equally be from West Wales. So the trading links are there. Links, not necessarily the word trade, because their idea of trade and our idea of trade are two different things, but sort of the links, the changes, that the vista, the world is very much that they were mobile.
Communication links, or you know, even community links.
Yes, community. I like the word community links. Community links, diversity, movement. Yeah, I do like that. Yes, I do. Anything else you'd like to say?
No, I think that's it really. I've enjoyed that little
And you had me in an image throughout the whole lecture.
And Brian.
I'm gonna ask now if there's anything anyone wants to say with Brian online. Brian, we're gonna have to go in a minute. So Brian, anything you want to say? Brian of Nazareth, you're a very naughty boy. You shouldn't be playing with that Welsh hole. Oh no, Welsh tart. Leave that Welsh tart alone. There you go. I thought I'd put that in there. So, Henry, I don't think Brian's got anything to say. So, you know, it's good we've had Brian and 7 others online. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and join the join button. I definitely need the money, right? Should I do a Bob Geldof? I can't swear. Give us your now. Hey, I'm looking like Bob Geldof, do I? Did Bob Geldof look like this? As soon as he had the money, he was able to have a shave. Oh, do you know that there's this that Alex Belfield? Have you been keeping up with him?
No, I haven't. I've been away, remember?
Oh, yeah. Look up a video on Alex Belfield, right? He was arrested and put away for 5 years because he was stalking Jeremy Vine. I tell you what, right? I can't stand Jeremy Vine. I could find lots better people you could stalk than him. God, he's a horrible guy, right. Jeremy Vine. Anyway, Oh, now I will lose my channel for saying that. So anyway, Brian's still here on his mobile phone. So Brian, I'm going to love you and leave you because I got to go. We'll be back on 7 o'clock tonight. I got a bigger group tonight. Who have I got tonight? I got Dodgy Dell. I got Dirty Ann. I've got Madeira Cake Goth. I've got Dickie Dark all tonight. So Brian, you can be part of that tonight.
And has Dell returned the red dress yet?
Yeah, he has returned the red jet dress, but the problem is it was a bit scuffed on the ankles. I don't know what you saying about the bit of the dress that you kneel down. I don't know what that's called. It's got to be the ankle bit, hasn't it? Anyway, Henry, I get a dash. So, oh, by the way, I've got to look at the chat box just in case, because you always put something in a chat box, don't you?
I haven't today. No, you're safe.
All right. Well, don't put anything in there because that's it. Anyway, Brian says, see you at 7. One love and love to all. Oh, we got to do the peace symbol, haven't we? One love. There we go.
Right.
Oh, you got to do the peace symbol as well. Go on, you got to do it. Yay. Cool. To one love. Anyway, guys, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next week, Henri, at 7 o'clock.
Right. Okay.
Next week it's 7. I'll see you then.
Okay. Have a good one.
Take care, guys.
Bye.
See you, Henry. Good to see you back from Canada and Australia. Bye.
Bye.
And Ukraine. But anyway, thanks for watching, guys. It's good to have. We've had a nice little group online today. That's 6 of you. Right, which is good. Which is really, really good. I'm happy with that. I've disabled my sound. Right, here we go. Anyway, good to have you all joining me. I'm going to go now. And yeah, this obsession about, I'm going to say it, like and subscribe. Joy. Anyway, yeah, I know I look like a hobo. Acting job until the end of this month. And then I'm shaving it off. I'll give the money to charity, or at least this. We'll use it for building. Take care, guys. We can use this wattle door. We go shave it off. Job done. Take care, guys. Bye. Bye.